Picture someone who eats clean. No processed food, no added sugar, no fast food, no alcohol. They cook at home, they read labels, they are genuinely trying. And yet, every year, quietly, their waistline keeps expanding. Not dramatically, just a little more each year, and no amount of dietary discipline seems to stop it. If that sounds familiar, here is what almost nobody tells you. Most conversations about belly fat are obsessively focused on food: what you eat, how much you eat, when you eat. And while food genuinely matters, the science tells a very different and more complete story. There are at least 7 causes of visceral fat accumulation that have nothing to do with what ends up on your plate. And if you are focusing all your effort on diet while ignoring these 7 factors, you are fighting visceral fat with one hand tied behind your back. Today we are going through all 7. The biology behind each one, what the research actually shows, and what you can start doing about each one. Let's get into cause number 1, chronic sleep deprivation. This sits at the top of the list because its effects are among the fastest and most measurable in all of metabolic research. Here's what happens inside your body when you consistently sleep less than you need. Your brain activates the HPA axis, the communication system between your hypothalamus, pituitary gland, and adrenal glands. This system floods your bloodstream with cortisol, not just in the morning when it belongs, but throughout the afternoon and into the evening when it should be declining. Cortisol is a powerful fat storage hormone, but it does not store fat evenly. Visceral fat cells have a much higher density of cortisol receptors than fat cells anywhere else in the body, which means cortisol preferentially deposits fat around your organs rather than under your skin. Sleep deprivation also disrupts 2 other hormones simultaneously. Ghrelin, the hormone that signals hunger, rises sharply. Leptin, the hormone that signals fullness, drops significantly. The result is that you feel hungrier, you feel less satisfied when you eat, and your body is simultaneously being told to store whatever energy it gets preferentially around your organs. Researchers at the University of Chicago put this to the test with striking results. Healthy young men restricted to just 4 hours of sleep per night for 1 week showed a 40% drop in insulin sensitivity. Their cortisol remained elevated well into the evening rather than declining naturally. In 7 days, their metabolic profile shifted meaningfully toward one that actively promotes visceral fat accumulation. 1 week of poor sleep created measurable hormonal damage. What to do about this? Keep the same sleep and wake time every day, including weekends. Keep your bedroom cool and remove screens from the bedroom entirely. Avoid bright light in the hour before bed. Cause number 2, chronic psychological stress. The connection between stress and visceral fat is one of the most well-documented in metabolic science and one of the most underappreciated in everyday life. Here is why it is so specific to visceral fat. Your brain cannot distinguish between a physical threat and a psychological one. An urgent email, a difficult conversation, a financial worry, traffic that makes you late. Your nervous system processes all of these through the same cortisol response that once helped humans run from predators. And visceral fat is uniquely positioned to receive that signal. The concentration of cortisol receptors in visceral fat is roughly 3 times higher than in subcutaneous fat. This is not random, it is evolutionary. Your body prioritizes keeping energy reserves close to your vital organs when it believes a threat is ongoing. The problem in modern life is that the threat never fully resolves. Email arrives again tomorrow, financial pressure does not disappear overnight, and the nervous system stays in a low-level alarm state almost continuously. Research has consistently shown that people with chronically elevated cortisol carry significantly more visceral fat even when total calorie intake is controlled and accounted for. The fat is not coming from overeating. It is coming from the hormonal instruction to store energy in that specific location. What to do about this? Long, slow walks without your phone are one of the most effective cortisol-lowering interventions available. Slow nasal breathing for a few minutes activates the parasympathetic nervous system and reduces the cortisol signal. Deliberately reducing unnecessary information stimulation lowers the cumulative stress load your nervous system carries. Cause number 3, prolonged sitting. Most people understand that exercise matters for fat loss. Far fewer understand that exercise and physical activity are not the same thing, and the difference matters enormously for visceral fat. When you sit for extended periods, an enzyme called lipoprotein lipase, which helps your muscles pull fat out of your bloodstream and burn it, drops sharply in activity. This suppression happens within hours of sitting and cannot be fully reversed by exercising later. A 1 hour workout does not undo 8 hours of sitting, as far as your metabolic machinery is concerned. Researchers at the Mayo Clinic found that people who sat more than 7 hours per day had significantly higher visceral fat than those sitting fewer than 3 hours, even after controlling for formal exercise habits. Both groups exercised regularly. The difference was what they did the rest of the time. This is captured in the concept of NEAT, non-exercise activity thermogenesis, the calories burned through all movement outside of structured workouts. The difference in NEAT between a naturally lean person and someone who struggles with weight can be as large as 2,000 calories per day. That gap is not filled by an evening gym session. What to do about this? Stand and move for 2 to 3 minutes every 45 to 60 minutes of sitting. Take a short walk after each meal. Even 10 minutes meaningfully changes how your body processes glucose. Stand whenever you are on the phone rather than sitting through the call. Because number 4, lack of morning sunlight. This one surprises almost everyone because the connection between light exposure and visceral fat is almost never discussed outside of research circles. Your body runs on an internal clock called the circadian rhythm. This clock governs far more than when you feel sleepy. It controls the timing of cortisol release, melatonin production, body temperature cycles, and critically how sensitive your cells are to insulin at different times of day. The circadian clock is primarily set and maintained by light, specifically natural light entering your eyes in the morning hours. When you wake up and spend your morning under artificial lighting, whether at home or at work, your body never fully receives the signal that the day has begun. The clock drifts, hormones fire at the wrong times, and insulin sensitivity suffers as a result. Research has shown that people who receive adequate natural light exposure during the day have lower fasting insulin levels and better overall insulin sensitivity, even after controlling for body fat percentage and the season. The reverse is also true and worth noting. Bright light exposure in the evening from screens and overhead lighting suppresses melatonin and dysregulates the circadian clock in the opposite direction. This creates a hormonal environment that is more favorable to fat storage and less favorable to the overnight metabolic work your body is designed to do during sleep. What to do about this? Step outside within 30 minutes of waking up without sunglasses for 10 to 30 minutes. This one habit costs nothing and touches multiple hormonal systems simultaneously. Cause number 5, daily exposure to xenoestrogens. This is the cause most people have genuinely never considered, and it may be one of the most significant ones in the modern environment. Xenoestrogens are synthetic chemicals that mimic the behavior of estrogen inside your body. They bind to your estrogen receptors and activate them exactly as natural estrogen would. They are found in plastic food and drink containers, in the lining of canned foods, in many synthetic fragrances, in certain personal care products, and even on thermal paper receipts. Research has estimated that the average person absorbs microplastic particles equivalent roughly to a credit card in weight every single week through food, water, and air exposure. Here is why this matters specifically for visceral fat. Estrogen dominance, a state where estrogen is disproportionately high relative to other hormones, is directly associated with increased fat storage around the lower belly and the visceral organs. And visceral fat tissue makes the problem self-reinforcing. It produces its own additional estrogen independently. The more visceral fat you carry, the more estrogen your body produces locally, which signals even more fat storage in that location. Xenoestrogen exposure from your environment adds external pressure to a cycle that is already running internally. What to do about this? Never heat food in plastic containers. Switch to glass or stainless steel for water bottles and food storage wherever practical. These are small daily swaps that reduce cumulative hormonal pressure over time. Cause number 6, insufficient muscle mass. Most people understand that exercise is good for weight management. Fewer understand the specific mechanism by which muscle mass directly governs where your body stores excess energy. Muscle is the primary glucose storage site in your body. Every gram of muscle tissue can store approximately 4 grams of glycogen. When you have adequate muscle mass, glucose from your meals flows preferentially into muscle cells to be stored and used. When muscle mass is low, that storage capacity shrinks. Glucose that cannot enter muscle cells gets redirected by insulin into visceral fat instead. This is a direct mechanical explanation for why people with less muscle tend to accumulate more visceral fat, even when their calorie intake is identical to someone with more muscle. Muscle tissue also contains a specific protein called GLUT4 transporter. These proteins pull glucose out of the bloodstream independently of insulin without needing an insulin signal to do so. More muscle means more GLUT4 transporters, which means your body clears glucose from the blood more efficiently with less insulin required. Less insulin circulating throughout the day means fewer fat storage instructions being sent to your visceral fat cells. A well-known meta-analysis in obesity reviews confirmed that resistance training improves insulin sensitivity independent of weight loss. The benefit shows up before the scale even moves. What to do about this? 3 to 4 resistance training sessions per week built around compound movements provide the most efficient path. Squats, deadlifts, rows, presses, and pull variations recruit the most muscle tissue and create the strongest metabolic response. Cause number 7. Gut microbiome imbalance. This is the most underappreciated cause on this entire list, and the research behind it is moving faster than almost any other area in metabolic science right now. Your gut is home to trillions of microorganisms, bacteria, fungi, and other microbes that collectively outnumber your own cells. This community, called the microbiome, does far more than help digest your food. It produces compounds that directly influence how your body stores fat, manages inflammation, and responds to insulin. Beneficial bacteria in a healthy gut produce short-chain fatty acids, particularly one called butyrate. Butyrate feeds the cells lining your intestinal wall, reduces gut permeability, and has been shown to improve insulin sensitivity directly. When the microbiome is healthy and diverse, these compounds are produced consistently, creating a metabolic environment that is less favorable to visceral fat accumulation. When the microbiome is disrupted, harmful bacteria take over and produce a compound called lipopolysaccharide. Lipopolysaccharide leaks through a compromised gut lining and enters circulation, triggering a state of chronic low-grade systemic inflammation. This inflammation directly worsens insulin resistance and promotes visceral fat storage. And most people carry this inflammation quietly for years without any obvious symptoms beyond persistent belly fat and low energy. A landmark study published in Cell in 2019 demonstrated this connection with unusual clarity. Participants with more diverse gut microbiomes had significantly less visceral fat even after controlling for diet and exercise habits. The gut bacteria themselves were acting as an independent variable in visceral fat accumulation. What disrupts the microbiome most commonly in modern life? Frequent antibiotic use, high consumption of ultra-processed foods, which lack the fiber-beneficial bacteria need to thrive, chronic stress, which directly alters gut bacteria composition, and low dietary variety, which starves the microbiome of the diverse inputs it needs to stay balanced. What to do about this? Introduce fermented foods consistently. Greek yogurt with live cultures, kefir, kimchi, or sauerkraut. Eat a wide variety of vegetables in different colors throughout the week, as diversity of input creates diversity of bacteria. Avoid antibiotics unless genuinely medically necessary. So let's pull all 7 together. Chronic sleep deprivation raises cortisol and insulin resistance simultaneously. Chronic stress keeps cortisol elevated in the tissue most sensitive to its fat-storing signal. Prolonged sitting suppresses the enzymes that help your muscles burn circulating fat. Lack of morning sunlight disrupts the circadian clock governing your daily insulin sensitivity. Xenoestrogen exposure adds hormonal pressure that directly promotes visceral fat accumulation. Insufficient muscle mass reduces glucose storage capacity and redirects energy into visceral fat instead. Gut microbiome imbalance creates the chronic, low-grade inflammation that makes visceral fat so difficult to shift. Now, here is what matters most as you sit with this list. It is not meant to overwhelm you. It is meant to show you that if you have been doing everything right with your food and still not moving visceral fat, the answer is almost certainly somewhere in these 7 factors. You do not need to address all 7 at once. Identify the 1 or 2 that resonate most clearly with your current life and start there. Work on it consistently for 6 to 8 weeks, then reassess. Your body is not randomly holding on to this fat. It is responding to specific signals it has been receiving, many of which have nothing to do with your plate. Change the signals, and the response will change with them. If this helped you see visceral fat differently, go ahead and hit that like button. And tell me in the comments, which of these 7 causes had you never considered before, and which one are you starting with first?